The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
This episode and every episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast was brought to you by the generous and awesome support of listeners like you. Do your part and go to matttalkonline.com/join the team and make your monthly pledge. You'll get some cool rewards and perks like access to my Matt Talk Online statistical almanac, digital preview guides, and even some cool swag like shirts, hats, and pint glasses. matttalkonline.com/join the team. And welcome back again, wrestling fans, to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Jason Bryant here with you. News, reviews, previews, and interviews for all the relevant topics in and around the sport of wrestling. Going to do something a little different today. Going to talk to Doug Schwab's wife, Allyson. Yeah, we're going to get a coach's wife perspective on the sport of wrestling. We're also going to get a little bit of behind the scenes on how these two became a couple out at Virginia Tech. Well, at least it started at Virginia Tech and then continued when Doug went back to Iowa and then ultimately married, kids, UNI position. We're going to go all into that. We're also going to go into some things regarding travel and parenting, things that personally I've done myself, and I think a lot of wrestling coaches and wrestling mothers and wives and grandmothers, they've all dealt with, in terms of what happens when your husband's on a trip or your brother's on a trip or your kids are on a trip. We're going to go into that too. One thing I do want to mention that I don't plug enough, and that is the daily wrestling newsletter that comes out every morning at 7 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Central, fill in the rest of the blanks. That's how time zones work, unless you're in China where they actually only have one time zone. Yeah, one time zone in China. So the daily wrestling newsletter, go to matttalkonline.com/news, sponsored graciously by my friends at Resolite every morning, barring a travel day here and there. You will get the top wrestling news from around the world. It's not just going to be the stuff that you see. I'm digging through newspapers. I'm digging through all sorts of blogs, podcasts, and of course the usual suspects like the Matt, Flo, Track, etc. to bring you a one-stop catch-all to start your day with wrestling news. It's free, but as the message at the beginning of the show indicates, if you are a fan of this network and a fan of the products that I put out, by all means, you can drop some change in that tip jar at patreon.com/MattTalkOnline. But sticking to the subject right now, MattTalkOnline.com/news. It will not cost you a penny to get each and every morning. Just boom, boom, boom. It sends all the links directly to those sites, so you don't have to worry about it. I'm not trying to take traffic from anybody. Matter of fact, I'm promoting traffic for everybody. So, and those links are crucial, because if newspapers are seeing wrestling links clicked on quite a bit, well, guess what? They might invest in some more wrestling coverage, and that goes for any website that's investing, coverage into the sport. So matttalkonline.com/news. Now that is out of the way, we're going to talk to Allyson Schwab, and we have some similar backgrounds in terms of places we've gone and things we've done in the state of Virginia, and let's hear all about it now here on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Oh, I forgot to say thank you for spending your time with me because, you've always got time for Short Time. Yeah, how do you like that? One element of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast is sometimes we talk about how the other half lives, and it's not the other half of wrestling. In this case, it is the other half of a wrestling family. The matriarch of the Schwab mob joins us on this episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Allyson Schwab, you've seen her and her kids battling on Twitter. Allyson, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Nice to be speaking with another fellow Virginian for the first time in a while.
Right?
I mean, even though, most people believe the state ends at Roanoke when you're from my part of the state. But, growing up in Southwest Virginia, Salem, you're a Salem Spartan, played some softball. And before we even get into the dynamic of the Schwab family and the basement battles that the boys are having, I just got to know, what is your experience with wrestling prior to marrying this guy named Doug Schwab?
Oh, gosh. Not very much. I grew up, my best friend, her dad was a wrestling ref. And so I did work the state tournament. I was a tapper for a few years and did anything that they asked me to. So that was probably my first experience with wrestling. But it wasn't until I went to college and met Doug that I really got involved.
So, we were talking before. You didn't even say anything about working the Salem Civic Center and hearing the guy who's been the Roanoke Valley guy, he's Waylon Ryder of Magna Vista, winner by pen. It's just like, it's like the ongoing joke with Salem is winner by pen. Come on, you can't leave that out in the pre-show.
I know. Well, there's a lot you don't know about me.
That's why we're here. We are here to discover all sorts of things in wrestling. But we were talking beforehand, and Salem had a pretty decent wrestling program back in the day. And, you're a couple years behind me in school, but there were some names I threw out. I remember James Giarla beat one of my teammates at the state tournament. And then Nathan Anderson was a heavyweight, and he was a pretty good football player. I think he went and played college football at some point. And, it's not just somebody you knew and went to high school with. That was actually a friend of yours.
Yep. We hung out a lot. There was a group of friends, and, we would just do whatever you did in high school, go to somebody's house, hang out, drive around. There wasn't really too much to do, and we didn't get into a lot of trouble. So my parents appreciated that.
Oh, I can't imagine there's any trouble to get into in Salem because, never mind. I won't even talk about the trouble I got into the 3 days a year I would go out there. Now, you're a college athlete, so to be a college athlete, you had to be a pretty good athlete in high school. You played softball. Did you play any other sports?
I actually cheered. So if you knew me as a cheerleader, you probably didn't know me as a softball player, and vice versa. If you saw me on a softball field, you would not expect that I was a cheerleader. So I played both parts well, but that was my other sport. I played basketball growing up until, about rec league ended, 7th grade-ish, and then I chose to be a cheerleader. I tried lacrosse for a little bit, and when I say little bit, I mean probably a summer in a all-boys camp that I got thrown into and, made them all mad by winning player of the week. So, but I would consider I was a tomboy growing up. I liked to play whatever, throw football at the tech games growing up, and I just kind of try to do it all.
So the opportunity to compete at the Division I level in softball, I mean, I know from personal experience that softball it's I don't want to say cult-like, but it's just like wrestling in terms of having its own culture and different nuances. I know I covered fast pitch softball in the summer times, and oh my goodness, these ASA tournaments, oh my goodness, oh, the cheers.
Oh, yeah.
The engine 19, hit that ball right down the line. Yeah, all of that stuff. 20 years later, still resonates in my brain. So, did you do any of that? I'm guessing you to be a high level athlete, you got to do that summer stuff too, like wrestling.
Yep. So it started out. My stepdad was the club coach at Virginia Tech before they had a varsity team, and so I would travel with them, be Batgirl, until I got to an age where they actually had teams at my age level. So about 12, 14 I started really playing in the summer, played pretty much Memorial Day through second week or so in August, and then we would pick right back up and play fall ball. So our vacations were one tournament you'd end, and then it'd be by a beach, and you'd drive to the beach or somewhere, for the middle of the week, and then head right back to the next tournament. And I did that from probably 14 through, because of my age, I was still able to play with my summer ball team after my first year in college.
Yeah, kind of like, for wrestling, people understand, like kind of a UWW junior, you could be a freshman in college and still could be competing there because it's, 18 to 20. Now, I'm curious. I mean, you listed as a second baseman on the Virginia Tech roster, which, by the way, just so folks are wondering, if they want to Google Allyson, her maiden name was Campbell, not to give away too much personal information, but the opportunity to go to Virginia Tech, your family had a legacy there at Virginia Tech. I mean, why did you choose Blacksburg to continue your collegiate athletic career?
Well, I've always been a big proponent of picking a school for the school, the atmosphere, the family. I never wanted to go to a school only strictly for the sport. It had to be something else. So I had gone and visited another college and just realized that, I felt at home at Tech. I had been going to football games since I was 4. So I was comfortable on campus, even though it's a big school. It's really hard to beat Blacksburg. I hate to say that where I'm at, because obviously we recruit against them now, but it's really hard to beat that campus. It is absolutely gorgeous campus. And I was 40 minutes from home. So I was they like to call me like a townie, you know, because I was in Blacksburg's backyard and could pop up and see games. And Coach Thomas, you know, he was always around, so I kind of would be like on their radar. But in high school, I actually pitched and played shortstop. I started out, I did everything. I started out playing outfield, and then once they realized that I could pitch, then I pitched. I caught when I needed, played shortstop, second base. In the summer ball program, I probably played more of second base, outfield, caught if I needed, but predominantly second base. So I knew going into college there was no way my pitching was going to be a level where I would actually pitch in college. If anything, I would like to say that I was probably the best BP thrower while I was there. So I threw a lot of BP, and the opportunity presented itself where I was able to try out and walk on. So I did try out and I walked on, and so I have like a soft spot in my heart for the kids that like really want to be a part of something and then work their tail off to do it and make the team and give everything in and out every day of the room, knowing that there's a good chance that they're never going to make that starting lineup. So I've got a soft spot in my heart for them, but, you know, worked my tail off and pinch ran, pitch hit a lot, got some opportunities at second. But predominantly my role was probably BP and like a pinch runner.
So you're not throwing gas like Angela Tincher did.
Oh, no. I never threw gas like Tincher. I don't know a lot of people that do.
Yeah, somebody from my high school, actually, Maggie Tyler played Virginia Tech. She's from my hometown, so it was kind of weird to watch. You know, I followed Virginia Tech softball because even though Maggie and I are considerably apart in age, it's just like, okay, that kid's from my high school, like committed to Virginia Tech as a freshman. It's like one of those things. It's almost like the problem we have in wrestling with early commitments. But I'm just like, okay, and then now to see her, she's covering, I think, JMU softball right now, works at James Madison. So it's kind of cool to see that thing. There's a Tech tie there. I mean, and as far as Blacksburg goes, yes, I know. I took a semester off from ODU, and I was out in Blacksburg probably every weekend that semester I took off. So I'd get a call from some athletes who shall remain nameless in the pre-Tom Brands coaching era and be like, hey, having a party. And I'm like, I'll be there in 4 hours. So yeah, I would, I'm kind of giving myself away a little bit, but I will say I enjoyed my time. This isn't the Virginia Tech show, so I can say that. I'm not scaring away recruits here, but when it comes to running into Doug, and this is something that, Keith Moreland was the coach there at Virginia Tech, and then the program was not exactly moving in some of the right directions according to the administration, and they make a big move. They hire Tom Brands, and Tom Brands brings in some Iowa flavor. Wes Hand was already there. Doug comes in. There's some guys training out there. I think Lee Fullhart came out to train a little bit. Nick Ficchetti was down there training. And what do you remember about the coaching change in the wrestling program when you were there? Was that something that you were aware of, or when did you first become aware that, okay, there's these Iowa guys that are now, I mean, granted, Moreland was an Iowa guy, but there were like an intense Iowa guy that's now the head coach at Virginia Tech's wrestling program.
Doug was there for 2 years, and I did not even meet him until his second year. Even though my locker room door was literally across the hall from his office door. So I passed by him every day. Our locker room door was in the hallway of the opening of the wrestling room because it was still on the bottom level of Castle then. And but outside of that, I didn't really, you just didn't really pay attention. You were so engrossed in your sport at that time, and being probably, I think I was a freshman and a sophomore then, trying to really just get my footing and routine down. And I kind of kept my head down. I went to lifting, I went to practice, went to school, and that's really all I had time for. And so I wasn't even really aware of, what other sports were doing outside of football games probably, and taking recruits that we had to the football games. So it wasn't until his second year that I actually met him, and then, was introduced to Tom and Wes and Lee and Nick and everybody that was surrounding the program then.
So I got to know, how were you officially introduced? Because I know that you've kind of tweeted a little bit about it, and there might have been a establishment that's famous in Blacksburg behind the scenes there.
Right. We met at Tots, which was Top of the Stairs, which was a bar. and it was summer, so he had gone out, and I just happened to get in and was celebrating a friend's 21st birthday, and so that's how we officially met.
As you do at top of the stairs. That's just what you do. I mean, I may or may not tell a story about me crab walking across Main Street from Big Al's to Sharky's. That may or may not have happened. Tom Long may or may not have poured a giant mug of beer across my head at Hokie House or PK's. I don't know. That may or may not have happened.
Yeah. So we met there and talked a little bit, danced, but didn't exchange numbers or anything like that. And went, on our way. The next day, I actually had ran right into him. I was on my way to go do my summer lifting program, and he came out of a doorway in Castle and literally ran smack into him, and still just was kind of like, hey, oh, cool, good to see you. And when I met him, I didn't know he was a coach. I mean, he was, I think, 26, 27 then, and he still has a baby face some days. So he looked super young, and I just assumed he was one of the wrestlers, and we hung out with a lot of the wrestlers. So when someone told me oh, he's a coach, I was like, what? And so eventually, long story short, we saw each other out later that week, and I think I said are you going to get my number?
Oh.
And then the rest was history.
Wow. So I got to know. So those don't count as first date. What was the first date? What was the first real date?
Oh, gosh. I think we went to eat and maybe a movie. So, but we were, he was a coach and I was an athlete. So eventually we were told by the administration we could not date or see each other. So then
I was curious about how that works. We're across different sports. Yeah. I mean,
Yep. We tried to, we both tried to fight it. He coaches a male sport. I'm in a female sport. Our sports don't interact. They don't cross paths, anything like that. And once my coach found out, he was like, well, I'm going to have to say something because, if we were to get in trouble, this would come down on me, and I didn't want anything like that. And Tom kind of felt the same way. So when they went to the AD, he was like, no, we can't allow that.
And this was Jim Weaver at the time?
And, you're I think I was 19. There's an 8 years difference between us. So it was devastating, to a 19-year-old.
So what year is this approximately? I'm trying to get a timeline here.
This would have been 2005.
Okay. So they're only there 2 years as a staff, and then they leave. And how does that news actually made national headlines in terms of, in wrestling, it was a real, you're taking sides. You're either there's already an anti-Iowa faction within the sport anyway. And then you've got this little program at the time, oh, poor Virginia Tech. So, I mean, this has got to be, what are you looking at? What do you remember about that time with all the drama that was going on with the coaching staff and the transfers, the administration not letting releases and things of that nature?
Yep. So we met in July, and I think Tom went for his interview and was hired, I think that April. So we hadn't even dated, a full year or anything. And I remember when he told me that Tom got the job, the first thing I said back to him was, you're going. I know you're going. There's no way you're not going. You're not going to not take that opportunity and go back to your home state and your alma mater. There's no way. And they were trying to see how things would play out. I think that Wes had been officially hired. Doug wasn't done with his contract until June, so he stayed around till June and was done with his contract. And but it was a big deal. I mean, it was, people at Virginia Tech were fired up and, pissed off that, they felt they had been shortchanged and promised these things, and then here, it was just ripped out. I do remember some of the Iowa guys playing the Iowa fight song in the locker room, hearing that they were playing this song and fired up that they were going to go back to Iowa. So I think, those guys knew right away that they were probably going to go back to their home state. And, I didn't blame them for that. I didn't agree with probably Tech not releasing them because I think there was some discrepancies in there as to some of these guys that came in that were, their parents asked, if something were to happen and Tom were to leave, would we get full releases? And, obviously I wasn't in those conversations, so I don't know. So that goes back and forth, between what Tech says and what they say they were told. So I wasn't in any of those. I just remember that it was pretty, dramatic change. And, I felt bad for the guys that didn't get a year, that lost a year. So, and I'm kudos to them for their loyalty, like Metcalf. I was friends with him in college, and he was only a few years behind me. So I got to see him his, true freshman year. And then here we were essentially both going to Iowa at the same time almost. So when I moved out there, he had just finished would have been his, redshirt freshman fall.
Yeah, and it's funny because earlier you had said, you were a fan of picking the school for the school, and here's a situation where these guys clearly picked the school because of the coach. Now it's just kind of like, every situation's different. Now I am curious, so you did complete your time at Tech before going to Iowa, right?
Yep. So I actually graduated a semester early. So I graduated in 3.5 years, December of 2006, and literally told my parents I'm going to pack up my car and I'm moving to Iowa. So the day after Christmas, I believe, I packed up a Honda Civic and drove out to Iowa.
Oh my goodness. That's not, I've made that drive I've made that drive from Salem out to the Midwest before. I remember a couple years ago I did that. Now, at this point, this has got to be, a pretty quick moving relationship. It's you're not allowed to see each other as, athlete and coach, and then they leave. So how quickly did you guys okay, we're officially official now that Doug is not employed by Virginia Tech?
Well, I think we kept seeing each other. We're rule followers, but, there's some times where, you don't follow the rules. So we kept seeing each other that whole time, but we did spend from June. I did an internship in Georgetown, and he moved in June to, Iowa. And so we spent from June to that December apart. And it was probably the best thing for our relationship. We had to figure out how to communicate. There wasn't, I think video messages were just coming out. Other than text, you talked on the phone. There was no, FaceTiming or anything like that. And he was new to texting. So that was kind of funny in itself. He didn't even probably text hardly till, we had met, because I remember Tom had asked him, who's this person you're texting all of a sudden? They would be on trips and whatnot. So it moved pretty fast. But, I remember it was pretty early that I said, I could see myself, down the road, us having a life together. And I said it to one of my teammates, and she still laughs at it now. Remember when we were in that workout and you said this? And I said, yeah. And it worked out for us. I picked up and moved, but I told him before I moved, I was like, if you don't see this going any further than dating, then I'm not moving across the country away from all my family, just to see what happens. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Now, when we look at the time frame too, because Doug is making a run towards the Olympics here, he's, in the way, if I'm hearing this correctly, you started dating, and then would you go through one season with him in Blacksburg? because the animated Doug Schwab we see now, when were you first introduced to that persona of Doug?
I went to a few practices, so I didn't get to see his animated coaching style. And a lot of the guys, because they were my age, they couldn't figure out why I was there. They thought I was dating someone on the team. So we hit it pretty well. It wasn't until that May that they figured out you're dating Doug.
Oh, now I get it.
It was kind of funny. Looking back on it now, I'm how did they not know? I think my whole team, knew, and that's just more girls too. But, I went to a few practices, but we were gone competing Thursday through Sunday. That in softball, you have to go to warmer temps. So we would leave on a Thursday and not get back till a Sunday or a Monday morning. So if they had home duels in February or, nationals in March, there was no way. March they were at nationals, and I was on our spring break, trip where we were playing 10-some games. So I really didn't even get to see that. And my first experience was, I think it was would have been the World Team Trials. And that would have been, maybe it was in Sioux City.
That would have been 06. That sounds about right. Because Ames 05, Sioux City 06, 07 was Vegas.
Yep. So I remember I went to Sioux City, and it was I mean, it was a completely different world, you know, for me. I remember, you know, obviously he didn't do well like he wanted to. And I think I was so shocked by everything, just the around him. And, you know, I didn't really grasp probably how big of a deal it was. You know, I mean, I was there to support him, but just at that time, like, I didn't know everything that went into it. I didn't know the sport well enough. I didn't know all the training that had, you know, backed up this process. And then you get there and you don't get what you want, and then you have to wait a whole nother year for it. So I was probably a bit naive then, and way more compared to, you know, the next couple years. And then obviously he had a great 2007, 2008.
I do remember the Sioux City trials because it was one of the hottest days. It was so freaking hot. Mm-hmm. I mean, it must have been 100 plus. It was just like, that was just brutal. And it was, I mean, there's like nothing around the arena. It was like no trees to block anything. It was, yeah.
Yep.
I remember playing disc golf with Ben Askren, and we found the highest place in that part of Iowa. It was like a water tower on top of a hill. And Mark Ellis trying to play disc golf was comical. But as we, you know, Doug makes a team in 07, makes a world team. And, you know, now instead of, you're not a wrestling. Well, first of all, how soon did you guys get married? Are we before the Olympics or after? I don't even know the official time of nuptials.
We did things a little backwards. So we actually had Hayden February of 08, and we got married in June of 08. So we always laugh that it's really hard to top 2008 because February we had Hayden. April he, you know, wins the trials or the U.S. Open. I think it was then June, you know, so he got sent to the best 2 out of 3 or whatnot. June, he goes and makes the Olympic team. August, we go to the Olympics. And in October, we find out we're pregnant with Hendricks.
Okay, yeah, busy year, 08 that was. I mean,
so we did everything in 2008.
I mean, the busiest thing on my end was, I don't know, I moved to Minnesota, I believe the day Doug was wrestling at the Olympics, if my timeline is correct. I actually remember, because I had a Schwab wrestling shirt. I had a Doug Schwab Olympic wrestling shirt. I mean, I think I bought them all that year. And I just remember the day I moved to Minnesota was the day I was mad because I couldn't watch Doug Schwab wrestle because I wasn't near the internet. I wasn't near TV. I was driving through freaking nowhere, Indiana. I mean, anyway, that's another story entirely. So we've got, let's say you said Hendricks or Hayden. Let's see, Hayden was first, then Hendricks. So.
Yep.
Now, going through, you know, you're not kind of a coach's wife, but now you're an athlete's wife. And then, you know, there's an Olympian. What did you learn about the Olympic experience? You know, being a college athlete, you know about training and whatnot, but what did you see really from Doug that you had not really known about high level, high caliber Olympic athletes?
It's just such a different area of focus. And it encompasses like everything. I mean, from what you put into your body to, you know, them coming in and drug testing you in your home and having to plan out your schedule, exactly where you're going to be, and then waiting for them, you know, to get USADA to get what they need. I mean, it just, every part of it surrounded his training. If, you know, Tom felt he needed to go out to the training center, he did. If he felt like he was going to train better in Iowa, he did. So a lot of it was just up in the air. And I really spent, I mean, even down to his dinner, I just wouldn't even make dinner because I would just say, like, wait till after practice and be like, what do you feel like you want? You know, because he knew what his body needed. And so I think that was the most impressed I was, and he continues to do that, but most impressed I was with him was just that he was so in tune with his body and what he needed to perform the best that he could. And as a former athlete, watching that and watching it at a completely different level, I was just so mesmerized by that like, you knew exactly what your body needed, whether you needed to go sauna that day or whether you needed to, you know, have a hard scrap. And he did a good job of listening to his coaches. And I think that, you know, I do think that there was time before that people had kind of written him off. And so that was frustrating, you know, and I mean, I've always cheered for the underdog. So it made us, you know, even more pumped up that when he won, because I think there was people that were, you know, ready for him to be done. And they were ready for these younger athletes to come in. You know, they were ready for like Metcalf, who was a college athlete but competing at a senior level and was an incredible wrestler, and they're kind of like ready for them to come up and he was adamant that like he knew what he was going to get to, and his goal was to get there and obviously win his goal, because I mean we all know him and he was not satisfied, but I think it's taken him till now to realize like just it was such an honor to get there.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, I mean, Doug was literally like seconds away from being beaten in the quarterfinals at the trials in Vegas, and then forced a third period. I think it was against against Zach Esposito. I could be wrong here, but I just remember looking at it, going, "Man, he was literally 10 seconds away from being in the consolation bracket at trials." It's crazy how things happen.
Yep, there was a lot of things. There was also like he got put to one of the years. I don't know I can't remember if it was 2007, maybe 2007 or 2008. But he got put to his back by Frere. And I remember we never really, like, talked, I mean, at the Open and the trials, he would come off the mat, and I would wait to meet him afterwards, but only strictly to get whatever he needed. If he needed food, if he needed water, whatever. Whenever I got to Vegas, I went and got groceries and the things that I knew that he liked, so that he would have them around him. And so I remember he walked off of that, I want to say it was to go to finals, and he walked off and came and met me, and I didn't say anything because I was like, I'm not saying anything about this. Just how about peed my pants when you're on your back and about to lose. And he looked over and he was like, well, did that make you nervous? and just had this little smirk about him, and it was just this different feel. He just was at an ease, and he knew that he was at the best, training wise that he's been at. And I felt really good about, him going into the finals, because I just knew like he just had this different air about him. So it was kind of funny.
One thing that comes to the reality of an athlete is when your career is moving on the as Zeke Jones would say, the backside of one's career. And after making the Olympic team in 2008, doesn't make the world team in 2009, is still coaching. There's that gap between the Olympics and taking the job at UNI. At what point did you see Doug was ready to hang it up? I mean, how difficult is that to watch? And two, I mean, how accepting was he to kind of accept that fate that, okay, I'm done?
Well, after the Olympics was really hard. I mean, it was really hard. You get to the absolute top of your sport, and then you don't get what you wanted. And you've heard other athletes talk about it. And going through it as a family, and especially not, quite understanding, because I'd have these selfish moments where I'd be like, are you serious? Like, not like get over it, but we've got to do these things today. And, unless you're at that level and watch someone go through it, you cannot process it or understand it. What I felt for like Jordan Burroughs, in 2016, I mean, I understood, like I knew exactly what Lauren, was going to see or probably go through, and just the different emotions of it. And so that's why I get really frustrated with people out there, that can sit behind computers and write on message boards and things like that, because you have no idea the time that not only is this athlete put in, but the time that their family has set aside other things. And then, you're tearing them down for not accomplishing something. It wasn't like they weren't trying, but I will say in 2009, 2010, Doug would probably never say, but 2009, he was not healthy. He had a stinger, something with his shoulder, but he would post up and he literally had zero strength on that side. And you could probably see if you went back and watched some of his matches. And I remember watching, I think we were in Council Bluffs. Would that have been 2009 or 2010?
Yeah, that'd have been both years. And it was, pretty sure it was Darren Caldwell that knocked him off of the championship side bracket.
Yep. And so, I mean, just that was really hard because I knew he wasn't at his best. And he had even gone and gotten, I think, like a shot or something else, for it, and had seen doctors. We had done everything we could to rehab him to get back to it, but it just wasn't happening. And so that was probably harder than anything because he was out there, but you knew he wasn't at his best. And that takes a toll on you, mentally and physically. But when he took the job at UNI, he got the job in May of 2010. So he still competed that last year, still wasn't completely healthy. I really wanted him to come back in 2012. I really felt like he had finally let his body rest, healed up properly. And then there was times where people in the room were like, wow, I just saw 2008 Doug. We always laugh because we're like 2008 Doug, that he'll come out every now and then it's like, heck to pay for the guys that are wrestling him. And I really thought that he would maybe come out in 2012, but he made a deal when he took the job as a head coach that was going to be his focus. He felt like it was selfish for him to train and for him to train properly and to accomplish what he wanted to. He needed to be completely selfish, and that wasn't fair to the guys that he had stood in front of and said, I'm here for you and to help you accomplish your goals, but now I'm going to take this back seat, and train for me. So he just knew that when he took that head coaching position that he personally felt like he should be done. So that's what he did.
What was that process like for you guys as a family? Here you are married, you got 2 young kids, and the opportunity to be a Division I head coach within the state of Iowa. Other than like that year where, Bobby Douglas and Jim Zaleski get shown the door the same day, these things don't really happen. So, explain the process. Was it an offer? Did he get a phone call? From your perspective, talk about how Doug went through the process of, I guess, being courted and accepting the position.
Jim Miller had a big part of that. He really kind of talked to Doug. I think asked him if he was interested in it. That's an opportunity. I think Doug talked to Tom. Tom gave him his blessing. Like, this is a great opportunity, especially to coach in the state of Iowa. So, as far as all of that, like, we were all for it. This was going to be a huge opportunity for him. Obviously he had, some people that he went against that were great candidates as well. I'm pretty sure Papalizio was one of them that it kind of came down to. And so, he had a great opportunity and saw it and knew he wanted to stay in the state of Iowa. But it was hard, too, because, he's a very loyal person. So leaving Tom, leaving the guys on the team that here he had gone and, helped recruit these guys to Iowa and then say, I'm leaving, that was pretty hard on him, especially that first year or until those guys that we had and he had invested time into had gone through Iowa's program. You could see at certain times, it'd be difficult because you've invested in this kid and you've spent so much time with them. And then now you're like, I'm against you, not against you, but I'm on the other side and I want my guy to beat you. So, but I said he did a great job navigating that. It was difficult from our end because you're moving, even though you're just moving an hour and 20 minutes, north, you're going into a whole new community. You're trying to make new friends, all that aspect. And here he was jumping right into wrestling. So from May to August, he drove back and forth from UNI to North Liberty is where we lived. And me and the kids were at home kind of trying to figure out living situation and packing things up and figuring out, how to navigate life with him being gone so much.
What was the most welcoming thing about the Cedar Valley, Waterloo, Cedar Falls, and UNI wrestling as a whole?
I think the biggest thing would be the community. The community really embraced us. They did a great job just making us feel welcome, encouraging Doug. Alumni reached out. They were excited, just to get some new blood in there. And Doug does a great job of including people. That was one of his first things was, I'm going to get here and I'm going to bring, alumni back that haven't been back to the West Gym in years. And especially since, now we're filling it up and it's, it's hot and it's sweaty and it's filled to the brim and people are standing and it's just such a great atmosphere. He's done a great job of pulling some of those alumni in that, haven't been back in years. So I would say the biggest thing is the community, our alumni, they really were encouraging. We had people that surrounded us that were just helpful with our family, helped me get into some different circles and gain friends, and then also including our kids. So we just had it was just a family feel. The community is a great community to be a part of.
Yeah, having spent a couple events in West Gym over the years, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if you're a UNI fan, it is comfortably uncomfortable. If you're an opponent, it's just uncomfortable.
Right. I mean, fans know, like, or they should know. I mean, they know to get there early and that you might not have a seat. And that's what makes it special. I mean, when you look around and you've got people standing up and they're yelling and they're on top of the mat and it's hot and you're, shoulder to shoulder with the people beside you and you're sweating, like, yes, it might seem like it's uncomfortable, but for us, it's like, this is wrestling. I mean, we're all coming together in the middle of winter into this hot gym, right on top of the mat, yelling, and you feel like you're a part of it. Like, I don't think that there's a better place to be.
And it's interesting coming from Virginia Tech, which at the time really didn't have very much wrestling tradition, to Iowa, one of the most storied wrestling traditions in the history of actually college athletics, and then to UNI, which had a great tradition back in the day, and it still has a very ardent and vocal supportive fan base. But compared to the three places, and what made you really fall in love with UNI?
I love the great tradition. I love that people, all take a part in it. So, I mean, I don't know how to describe it. It's not a big place like Iowa. All the sports kind of know each other. The coaches, they're all supportive of each other. It's not a big deal to see, one of the other head coaches at the meet. I mean, it's a big deal that they're there, but they're coming there because they want to support Doug. They're not making the appearance for themselves or anything. And I love that small feel. I love the fact that, you have people in the community that are coming up and asking, like, hey, what can we do to help you? How can we help the program? And maybe too, because it's smaller and I have a little bit more involvement here, you take a little bit more ownership into it than I've had to at like bigger schools. But we had our president and his wife sitting beside us at Big 12, yelling, cheering with me, and you've seen me yell and probably heard me yell. I mean, sometimes I get into it. And so you have the president of your university sitting beside you and his wife is yelling just along, just the same as you are at these wrestlers. And it's awesome. Like, I just don't know another place that you're going to get that.
And a couple things that kind of evolved out of this. I mean, branding at UNI has become a thing. Schwab Mob's a thing. Panther Train's a thing. And when we look at the evolution from wrestling wife to coach's wife, how have the responsibilities changed for you? I mean, I don't want to say responsibility, but you talk about taking up other roles, but being the coach's wife, is almost kind of almost team momish, so to speak.
Yep. And I mean, I had some great mentors. I mean, I had time around Jenny and Michelle Brands and Kathy Gable, and I mean, they're really next to those three, and what they do for their husbands and their program. I don't know a lot of people that you're going to learn, any better from, probably. So I had a lot of experience just kind of watching them navigate that. I was able to ask them questions. Like, I remember asking, Michelle Brands when Doug was competing, things that maybe that she wished she had done differently, or things that she, did that helped Terry. I mean, so I was surrounded by a lot of people before I came here that gave me a better idea. Now, when I got here, it's completely different. Asking and actually doing is completely different. And I will never forget, like, our first team meal and the fear I had of just, fixing so much food or having people over, or having enough food. And I still worry about that each meal. And we're, 10 years in or so. And, but the main thing is that I took up some different roles. I love helping these guys any way we can. I love the family feel. So I'm the one that, I typically ask about their grades or their girlfriends or, where they're living, what they're majoring in, or just going up and saying like, hey, that was a great match. Like, I just feel like that's more of my role. I just want them to feel comfortable here, especially if they're far from home. I want them to be able to ask me, hey, can you help me do this? Or do you know a car person in town? Do you know, I've been asked, like, can you help me iron my shirt for an interview? So we just want to be able to help them in any way possible. And then outside of coaching role, I do anything I can to help PWC and raise money for that. So whether it's helping at our golf outing, helping with our gear, anything to do with fundraising to help both sides, UNI and PWC.
And speaking along the fundraising and everything that goes along with it, well, you can't mention UNI wrestling without mentioning, the first lady of wrestling, Sandy Stevens. What were your first interactions like with Sandy, and what's it like to see her in an atmosphere where she can really pull for her Panthers instead of, having to kind of be silently cheering from an announcer's table?
It was great. Obviously I had heard her many in Midlands and Nationals before. So, you know her voice, but meeting her in person, she's such a genuine, honest, loving person. I think one of the first times I really sat down with her was maybe at a Midlands, and we were in the hotel lobby, and we sat there and talked, and, I asked her questions, and she kind of asked me questions, and, developed this friendship with her. And it's, so awesome to see, and we love having her back, and what she has done for not only our program, but the sport of wrestling in general is just probably outdone, not even compared to anyone else, what she does. But she constantly is coming back and helping us fundraise and being at meets and doing anything that she can to get Doug, what he needs for the team. And we are forever grateful for that woman. She is an absolute amazing lady to be around.
As we talk about the family situation and move away from wrestling just a little bit, even though wrestling is always involved in the family situation, with the boys, Hayden and Hendricks, who, have the nickname Bob. Let's explain the names. What's the story behind, I think Hendricks, most people can probably figure out, but what was the story behind the name of the boys, Hayden and Hendricks?
So Hayden, we really just like the name Hayden. We get asked all the time if it was after Hayden Fry, because we were at Iowa then. But you know me, I'm a Virginia girl, and I knew who Hayden Fry was, but he wasn't, huge to me. I didn't grow up in Iowa. I just really liked the name Hayden. And so that's kind of how he had his name. Hendricks, obviously, Doug's a big Jimi Hendrix fan, and we sat there for a day trying to decide, are we really going to name our kid Hendricks? But we did. And then Bob came about because the boys are 16 months apart. So Hayden couldn't say Hendricks, and he just called him Bob. So it stuck, and we think that he was probably trying to say baby, but he probably just said ba, and we would say ba, and we'd say Bob, and then he just started saying Bob. And so all of our athletes and a lot of Hayden's friends and probably a lot of our past athletes at prior schools know him as Bob.
Plus, being in wrestling, you don't want autocorrect to spell it like Johnny Hendricks. You want it like Jimi Hendrix.
Right, exactly.
So when did the basement battles begin? For those who are unaware, Allyson posts on social media just the battles between the two boys wrestling. And even though they weren't even competitively wrestling in practice or anything yet, but the basement battles began. Whose idea was this and why? Just why?
I know. I don't know. They started wrestling, and I think, it just started kind of filming some of it, and people loved, just that they were little and, oh, how fun is that? And then we started getting asked the question, like, when are you really going to let them wrestle? And I remember Flo came in early when we were here because the boys were pretty young, and they even have footage of them wrestling in the room. And so we still had like our house in Iowa City that we were renting out, but the the housing market went to crap like right around the time that we started moving up here. So we were still renting our house out there, and we were renting places up here. So it went from like basement battle to living room battle to now in our home that we have that will be here for a while. When we knocked down a wall down there, the first thing that we did when we had carpet was the boys wanted to wrestle. And so we would just laugh because they would get these singlets on and they wanted to be their names called out. So for a while they had music, and Doug would say, in the red corner, weighing in at, 51 pounds. And we would just laugh, and people loved it because it reminded them, of their kids growing up, or it reminded people of wrestling their brothers when they grew up. And so it just became this thing. And then people, wanted to see kind of like how they were developing. And it wasn't really until outside of like a few practices and a couple like kids club practices, they really didn't start truly wrestling in practice until this last August.
And you had put them in gymnastics before that, right?
Yep. So they went into gymnastics. We figured out that if we didn't teach Hayden how to flip or to fall properly, we were going to have a lot of broken bones in our future. So he started gymnastics pretty much right after he turned 3. And he did gymnastics. They can't compete until I think they're about 6. And Hendrix kind of took a little bit longer to get in there, and he was a little bit of our spicy child, wild man. So he was more around 4.5, and we started up here, and we kind of saw that, Hayden really enjoyed it. He had some really good skills, and at the time, I just wasn't. I didn't feel comfortable with one of the coaches, and he's no longer there anymore at the place that we left. But we kind of ventured out and went down to Iowa City, and for 3 or 4 years, we drove down to Iowa City, and they competed out of Iowa City. And so, and really, I really thought that maybe they would actually be gymnasts and that we weren't going to go the wrestling route. And Doug didn't care either way. A lot of people would ask him, like, well, when are they going to wrestle? And his answer was always, they're always around it. I mean, they're always around the sport. So if they want to do the sport, they're going to naturally gravitate towards it. I'm not going to force them to do this sport. And eventually, they started just wrestling more in the room. And it took Hendrix a long time to get comfortable in front of people. He used to ask me, like, how many people were in the room before we would go into the wrestling room. So he was just a little bit more shy at the beginning. And then slowly they started to kind of gravitate towards wrestling. And then eventually, we had the twins. So we had the twins in May of 2017, and we had to take a break from gymnastics because there was no way I was going to be able to drive newborn twins and those two an hour and 20 minutes down to practice a couple of times a week. So, and everybody thought we were crazy anyways for doing it. But what my kids got out of that sport is, I will never regret putting them in gymnastics. And any of our other kids, the girls just had their first gymnastics on yesterday, practice. And it is an absolute amazing sport for both men and women. But we really put them in there because we liked gymnastics, not even for the aspects of it being good for any other sport. And then it just benefited, and we saw the benefits of it in wrestling. And then they play football in the fall. So it was truly amazing what that sport has done for them.
Of these basement battles, when did you realize that it had kind of taken on a mind of its own? I mean, the social media response has been, each one, it seems like it's growing and growing. And when did you realize, like, we've kind of created a monster with these Instagram videos?
Right. Probably maybe 2 years ago, I probably realized, wow, there are a lot of people watching or commenting, but the boys loved it. Also, I think it kind of gave a true feel of us navigating parenting through the different stages. We had to really work hard for our boys to learn composure, and that's part of the reason why we didn't put them out on the mat sooner. Doug felt it was really important, and I did too, that, if you can't compose yourself in the basement, then how are you going to compose yourself on the mat? And we understood that, it's a little bit different when you're wrestling brothers. It's easier to get into it, that kind of thing. But that's really where we practiced some of those techniques, were in our basement before we went out on the mat. And it wasn't to say like, oh, my kids can't get upset or fired up or anything like that. But I also don't want my kids like losing it on the mat or hitting or, crying through an entire match or anything like that. So we really just gauged their emotional response in the basement as to when we felt it was appropriate to put them in a position where they would be out there competing. Gymnastics, they're on their own. So yeah, they had plenty of times where they fell and didn't do well and had to fight through it. And we thought it was amazing that those things were taught, but it's different than when you're facing someone face to face, your hands on them, and you're both trying to win, and you're getting pushed around and you're getting held down and, you're in those uncomfortable situations and positions. So we really felt that the basement battle actually helped us teach some of those things.
There are two other social media things that will always stand out, no matter how old and gray we get in this sport. Is one was the reveal that you were expecting, and two was the reveal that there were multiples involved. So first, explain how you, for those who are unaware, how you kind of told the world that there was going to be another Schwab baby coming along.
So both of our boys, thank God for Andy Rovat. We love him so much. And Cliff Keen. They both sent them each a singlet. The boys loved the USA Wrestling singlets, and Doug was like, man, our Olympic singlets weren't that cool, you know, and I didn't have my name on it. And so all of a sudden in the mail, we get this package, and it's a red and blue singlet for both boys. It says Schwab on the back, has a Statue of Liberty on one of them. I think like a crest on the other. I mean, just amazing singlets, right? And so both of our boys had them, and they would wrestle in them. They loved them. And then when we found out we were pregnant, I reached out to Andy and said, hey, we're expecting another, and I would love to have like your smallest possible singlet, if there's any way I could buy one from you to match the boys. And then it just kind of came together. I put both boys in there, and they each held up a little tiny singlet that said Schwab, and we said we were, going to be expanding our family, and we let the boys open that gift. So they couldn't figure out when they opened it why there was a singlet in there and only one. And I think even one of the boys asked if it was for our dog. And I started laughing, and I was like, no, we're going to have another baby. And they were through the roof excited, because Hendrix would be a big brother, and he hadn't had that chance yet. And it was definitely a little bit of a shock, to us. It had been, I think it's an 8-year age difference between the boys and girls. And we had kind of even looked into possibly fostering or going the adoption route. But we just kind of, let things happen. And we're very blessed to find out that we were pregnant again. So that's how we announced to the world. And that was on a Friday. And I think that we had meet that night, and I went in on Monday and had an ultrasound, and I couldn't figure out why they wanted to do one. So I thought they just were going to, check the due date. And it was within probably a minute or two. And she said, well, I have something to tell you. And I said, oh my God.
Oh, that's like the most scariest moment, isn't it? Like when a doctor says they have something to tell you, you're like, ugh.
But I'm kind of watching the screen, and, we'd had 2 other kids, so I'm watching the screen, and I said, there's like in my head, like, that does not look normal. There's something else there. And she kept going back and forth across this, spot. And I'd see kind of 2 little things. And I'm like, that is so weird. And so when she said that, my first reaction was, oh my gosh, you're going to tell me I'm having twins. And she said, you're having twins. And then that's when everybody was like, I wish you had a camera on you, because I was by myself. Like no one was with me. I told Doug, there's no point of you going. We know we're pregnant. This is just to check the due date. And so thankfully I'm glad he didn't, because then I got to go film him and tell him. And that was like the best video I've ever had. I remember watching it as it happened, and I went and showed my wife, Abby, right away. I go, Abby, watch this. And she's like, what? I go, just, okay, they're pregnant. Now, like this is Alice. She's showing Coach Schwab the ultrasound picture. Like, watch the response. And she's like, oh my God. Now, and there's another thing that's also kind of weird is, making this type of information public. I mean, I remember we kept our first pregnancy pretty close to the vest for a while. And then the second one, some people are averse to putting things about their kids or their personal lives on social media and whatnot. Was there ever any question about, should we keep some of this a little more private, or, what's the mindset with saying, okay, let's make fun of Dad on this one? Right. No, Doug's always been pretty open. And if there's anything ever, even in writing or a video or a picture where I question that maybe he wouldn't like it or doesn't, show him in a light that he wants to be seen, then I ask him, before I post anything. I'll say, is this okay for me to post? If I've ever written about us, our marriage, our kids, anything, our beliefs, then he typically reads it before I post it. If it's just me, then I just post it. But he's been pretty open to it. And we've always just felt that, we want people to see both sides of it. We want an authentic relationship. We want people to be able to go from my Instagram to meet me in person and it be the same person. And I feel like some of the things that we've shared along the way have really, from the messages and responses that we've gotten, have really helped other families or other couples, or given ideas for parents, that were struggling in that same situation. And that's really, what we want to use that social media platform for. I mean, I love taking pictures of my kids and posting them. And I do the chat books and the social books and stuff to keep as memories. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, we love being able to have that interaction with people and helping people, or just giving them the acknowledgement that, like, hey, we're right in there with you with this, and we get it. And parenting is hard, and sometimes marriage is hard. So we just want to help if we can.
Now, as the two girls, the twins, Jenna and Lennon, and again, we were talking about things that are almost like frightening for parents to hear. I remember, just for full disclosure, my oldest daughter, we were diagnosed with hydrocephalus before she was born. So we knew that there was going to be a situation with her. I won't go into the nuances of what hydrocephalus is, but that was the one thing we knew about. When she was born, welcome 17 other afflictions that we had to be concerned about. So at almost 7 years old, now we've gone through the battles of surgeries and all sorts of preventive medicines and things like that. Every time she gets sick, it's always a battle. And anytime you hear something that's not right with your child, it rocks your world a little bit. Actually, it doesn't rock your world a little bit. It rocks your world a lot bit. And when you got a diagnosis with your twins, explain what went through your mind and how you've kind of dealt with that over the last several months, I guess.
Yep. So after a little backstory, about after a year, I kind of noticed they weren't really talking. And so that was our first cue, is that, this isn't kind of normal in regards to comparing them to our other two children. And people had said, oh, they're twins. They were in the NICU. They were early. And we were only in the NICU for 2 weeks. And there are people that are in the NICU, like, you guys, way longer.
Yeah, we were
that.
in for 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, but so people had said, oh, they're twins. They have their own language. And I kind of went along with it for a while, but, we never really saw them interact unless they were wrestling, which they were very, they like to wrestle and have pacifier battles and things like that. And eventually, once we got to their 18-month appointment, I brought it up again that they weren't talking. So they weren't really saying any words. They didn't say mama, dada, anything like that, that a child of that age pushing, 2 years old, they want you to have so many words of them saying, if not putting two words together. And so she did a screening and came back in the room, and Doug was on his way to Vegas, and she said, hey, we did the screening for autism, and they failed it. And so you're like, okay, maybe this is a good thing. They don't have autism. And she was like, no, I mean, we're going to refer you to Iowa City to be seen. So I think I stood there for a second, and then I, started crying. And I think I called Doug crying a mess because he was on the road to get ready to leave for Vegas. And so we didn't even know, what any of that entailed or anything, but she was able to get us into speech therapy right away, which we knew they would need regardless. And so we went at the end of March. It was supposed to be in February, and it kept getting pushed back. And so, you kind of had this hope of they're really going to develop in this next month, and we're going to be able to show Iowa City all these things, and they're not going to get diagnosed. And we got to Nationals and obviously had a great Nationals. And we went in the Wednesday after Nationals and saw a doctor and a psychologist. Both girls did, and it was early appointments and long day, and came out, and both kids were diagnosed with autism. And we had a feeling going in, both speech places that we had gone to had said they had seen red flags. So we had kind of braced ourselves for it. And when we came out of the first of 2 appointments, Doug had already said, I've already ordered books. I've already ordered books on it. And so we kind of knew right then we were going to walk out of there with that diagnosis. And, it's definitely, nobody wants their child to have anything. I know that perspective-wise, there are kids that are fighting cancer battles and way worse things, and, or parents that have lost their child, and, or your child's gone through, like you said, 30 plus surgeries, and she's 7 years old. I mean, that in itself and the stress of each time of her going under, I can't imagine. And, but at the same time, your world is completely changing because now it's, you're thinking about all the help that you're going to need and how your schedule is going to change so that they get the therapies that they need. And, thankfully, my job as a photographer is I'm able to schedule around Doug's schedule and the boys' events and the girls' needs. But like I said, no one wants their child to have anything, and it was definitely overwhelming. But just like anything, like the wrestling community and the UNI community and our family and friends, like they backed us up, and people wore blue for us on the Autism Awareness Day was literally a week, I think, after we were diagnosed. And just the support that we had, the messages we received from people that we don't even know in the wrestling community or people that follow us on social media was overwhelming. And, if anything, you felt love out of anything. It was just our family, our kids are so well loved by so many people. And so with that support, you just know that even though the hard days are going to come, you have all these people that are backing you up, that are asking how they can help, that are sending ideas. And, how can it go wrong, right? They might not have the exact same life as, we thought they might have, but it's probably going to be better in other ways.
And when the travel, and this is something that we deal with in my family, is, there are long stretches where, you kind of compared it to softball. You're out on a Thursday, back Sunday night, Monday. That's the same with wrestling, especially these international trips where, in my case, I'm gone 10, 11 days at a time. So what type of, I guess not fallback, but what type of support do you get, with, Doug being from Iowa, my wife's from Minnesota. So we got family that can come help us here. What has it been in terms of the support? Like, can you go into detail? Like, has it been family? Has it been people just coming over to help you watch the two boys while you take the girls somewhere? How does that dynamic really work when Doug's gone?
Oh gosh, it's a whole combination of those things. We have family close. Both his brothers and his sister live within an hour. The two brothers live both within 20 minutes. So we have them. Unfortunately, he's lost both of his parents. His mom, he lost this past August. So, that's made this year probably more difficult than any other year, past, because she was a huge support system, not only for him, but for our family, and would, just come over and do respite care, like just give me a break. And so that's really hard, not having her or not having my mom near here. She's in Virginia. And so, how that it is. Like, everybody wants their mom or that mom, feel. But we have had some amazing babysitters. We have like Bree and Morgan and a lady across the street, Deb, who is almost like another grandmother to my kids. We had Anna Dresser, who is Kevin Dresser's daughter. She was here for a semester, and we absolutely loved her. And so, and she gets the Virginia roots. But everything from that to our kids, their coaches, like the boys, Cruz or one of the guys on the team will bring the boys home from practice. And because I'll be putting the twins to bed. And that. It's hard to sit back at, bedtime just to pick up the other two from practice. And Doug's gone quite a bit. Between last-minute recruiting trips, fundraising for UNI, PWC, or any of the events that you're at, probably. It can be a lot. But we are really grateful that we have the support that we do. When we had the twins, we had friends that stepped in and brought meals over and just did anything. Dropped off coffee, came in, changed diapers, washed bottles. So we've been very lucky in that aspect of having help surround us.
Moving to the next steps, and as the kids get older, the boys get older, how are the boys understanding what's going on with their baby sisters?
Well, they were, I don't want to say like an interruption, but it was all about the boys until we had the twins. And so if anything, these girls have made our family, more grounded. It probably took the boys out of the center, and really made them aware of, hey, you're not going to be the center of everything all the time. And as a family, to work how we want to work, all of us are going to have to work together. And thankfully, they are very good with our girls. Everything from, getting them dressed, to changing diapers, to carrying them up the stairs, to playing with them outside while I get meals done. When Doug's gone, it's very important for how they, fit into the everyday necessities, whether it's one entertaining the girls while the other is helping me get dinner on the table. So they have, their world's definitely been interrupted, and there's been some times that's been challenging, but they're very concerned for their sisters, which is, as a parent, you want your kids to love each other. That's like, you want your siblings to love each other and to fight for each other. And they have done a great job of asking questions. They ask a lot of questions, what they're going to be able to do, and we don't know that. I say, like, we plan for them to be able to do everything. And when it gets to that point, we'll adjust if we need to adjust things. But they know that their summer is going to look a little bit different. They're going to be going to speech and watching their sisters at speech, Monday through Thursday. Or maybe we go to the pool, but the girls are going to have like a kind of like a water therapy swim lesson. And so they know that there's going to be some things that are going to revolve around their sisters a little bit more. But more than anything, I think they really love the fact that in a few years, their sisters are going to be sitting in the stands cheering for them. And that's what I try to tell them. Like, you're putting all this, you're investing in them now and you're developing these relationships with them, but really they're going to be your biggest fans. And they already do love our boys, and they, reach for them and love when they play with them, but they're going to be your biggest fans and your biggest support systems when you're in, junior high and high school and beyond. And I mean, what an awesome thing to look up in the stands and have two little girls yelling your name, right? So we try to just do that, try to, talk to them a lot about it. And we don't really baby them in that aspect. Like, the girls are going to have challenges. They're going to look a little bit different than some of the challenges you face, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to do the things that you're going to be able to do. It just might take a little bit longer. We might have to figure out a different way for it to be done.
Moving to some more of the happier, amusing things about parenthood and the backgrounds that people have. One, when have you guys gone minivan, or how soon was that decision? Because I'm holding out. I got two girls. I got as close to a minivan as I could get with the Chevy Traverse. It doesn't have the sliding doors, but ooh, man, that was a tough decision. Say, you know what, I can go minivan. My wife goes, no, we're not doing it.
I haven't. So we're very thankful. We have Rolling Ford in Shell Rock, and Greg Stockdale is a absolute huge supporter of us. And so Doug gets a bigger vehicle through them, through his job at the university. And so we have not had to collapse on the minivan. But I did drive one for like almost a year, and or at least like a full summer. And I'm telling you, like, you're hating on the wrong thing. Like, you can still be cool in a minivan. I'm all for them. Like, you don't have to stay there and go, watch your door. Don't open the door. Watch the door. Like, you just press a button.
Yeah, I will say that there are a number of dings on the driver's side rear door of my wife's Pontiac G6 from my old Trailblazer. Now we've had to go to the Traverse, and it's like having to rearrange the garage, because in the Midwest, you're using your garage because you don't keep your car outside. Secondarily, Doug's, I guess, I don't want to say propensity, but his favoritism for a said caffeinated beverage is somewhat legendary. Mountain Dew quotient in the house. I mean, do you keep this under lock and key? I mean, what's his real Mountain Dew consumption like these days?
It's probably a little less right now because you can't find white label anywhere. So he's like, I feel like he's detoxing right now. Like, he actually came home with a black label yesterday, and I looked at him and I was like, are you switching to black label? And that was my first question. So I think he's probably struggling a little bit because there's not any white label. I think he's drank all of them in the state of Iowa and possibly surrounding states. So he gets really excited when he gets to go out of town.
One of my main things is, like, I don't drink much of the soda anymore, and it was like the Baja Blast was like the sole reason to go to Taco Bell back in the day. I was like, man. And then I looked at the amount of sugar in those things. I'm like, maybe it's good that I don't drink those. Now, what do you miss most about Salem, Virginia? And there's only one correct answer to this outside of your parents.
Oh, Mac and Bob's.
Absolutely. What is Mac and Bob's for those who are unaware?
Oh, it is this absolute wonderful hometown restaurant. I mean, I grew up, in one booth, you've got people that came home from the ball fields all day and a full team. In another booth, you've got, family out for just a family dinner. We went there before and after our 8th grade dance. Like, you just grew up in there. I mean, their kids are younger than me, but we watched their kids grow up. And I served tables there at the end of high school and all through college. And, there's just not a better establishment and better families that run that restaurant.
That was also where again, just for backstory, my high school is a AA high school. Her high school is a AA high school. So the state wrestling tournament was in Salem for those size schools. Now we've got too many freaking divisions in Virginia. That's another, right. We go down. Yeah. I mean, how many? Yeah. Just story. That's, yeah. Being Virginia high school athletes, it's like, yeah, sore spot. But we'd have our post tournament celebration there. I mean, it was like, it was a thing. I mean, and now I'm looking at, I'm still kicking myself having gone to Roanoke for D3s a couple months ago and not having the chance to have a break in between sessions long enough to get over to Salem. I mean, I think there's a picture of me in college doing a keg stand wearing a Mac and Bob shirt. Seriously, this place has actually been, every year that's kind of part of my thing. It was like the deal when you went to Salem. It's like, all right, we're going to go down Electric Road and have the song Electric Avenue stuck in your head from the big brown dump that is the Salem Civic Center. I'm sorry, I hate the place.
Yeah,
even though, I mean, I'm scarred from all these state titles that Grundy won when Kevin Dresser was the coach there.
Right.
And then, my high school wins it in 99. I'm out. I don't get to celebrate like, I'm on the team or anything, but Mac and Bob's was still where we celebrated. So that is one of the best things about Salem, Virginia. The Civic Center is probably one of the worst. But now, what is the best thing you love about Waterloo Cedar Falls?
Oh, gosh. Really going to put me on the spot.
They don't have to be a sponsor of the program either.
Right. Way to go.
I mean, if it's brick oven pizzas from Mulligan's, that's acceptable.
Right. We love Mulligan's. We do love Mulligan's. Everybody in our family loves Mulligan's. So, and they are, I mean, you love them from the people that they are too. I mean, Bennett down there, I mean, he is awesome. So Morgan, I mean, we're very thankful for them and everything that they do for us and the fact that they have good food. So but one of the best things about Waterloo Cedar Falls is their trails.
Trails.
So
okay.
their trails, like bike trails, walking trails. I mean, they go all over the city. So you really can get out and go a long distance and have your kids and family with you and just not even feel like you're in a city at all. So that would probably be my favorite thing about Waterloo Cedar Falls is their trails.
Biggest misconception that you have thwarted about the state of Iowa since you've been living there?
That I don't live in a cornfield. Everybody thinks that when I say, oh, come visit me, they really think that I'm surrounded by cornfields, which, I mean, yes, outside of Cedar Falls, but like a friend came and she was like, oh, this is just like Salem. And I said, you're right. It's almost the exact same size. And no, I don't have like a barn in my backyard. And, we know people that do, which I love, but I think they really think it's just farmland.
Now that you mention it, Waterloo Cedar Falls is very, I mean, they're cities that abut one another, very similar to Salem and Roanoke. Go figure. And to that point, everybody thinks I live in an igloo up here in Minnesota. So again, another misconception. And finally, we cannot go through a whole interview talking about Northern Iowa without mentioning the first national champion since 2000, Drew Foster. Explain what Drew is like off the mat and what was it like to see him win the title and give Doug his first national champion as a head coach?
Well, I mean, Drew's an incredible person, first off. Yes, he's a absolute amazing athlete, but off the mat, he is just incredible. I mean, as far as his interactions with my kids, with my family, very loving, comes from a loving family. I mean, he just really cares about how he's going to make an impact in this world. I mean, we really can't ask for a better person who has won that, and you can go back and watch any of his interviews, and you would know exactly what I'm talking about. He never says I. It's always we, his teammates, his coaches. He really gives credit to the people that got him there, and not just standing up there and saying, yeah, I did this. It was huge for our program. I think that I've probably jumped up and down. I think there was a pit wrestler in front of me that sat in front of me, and I'm pretty sure I hugged him too when it happened. And after I grabbed his shoulders forever, towards the end and stuff. So, shout out to that guy for handling us sitting behind him. But it was incredible. I mean, he just has been such a great ambassador for this sport. He's been such a great role model for my kids and family. I know that he's going to do big things wrestling-wise, but he's going to do even bigger things as a teacher, as an advocate for kids. I mean, he's just really going to do a lot of things in this world.
Oh, at least they were Panthers, at least. I mean, they might have been the Pittsburgh variety, but, at least they were Panthers, right? You're creating a different type of Panther train there at Nationals. Oh, bad jokes. Dad jokes everywhere. That happens when you get older.
Right? Gosh.
A couple questions came in from Twitter, and one of which is asking about a trip to Africa. I'm just going to, that's more of an inside joke than I know anything. So what's up with that?
No, we really are going to Africa. Me and my oldest son are taking a mission trip to Africa. We leave June 14th from Chicago, and we will go over to Uganda. And I think it's 3 plane rides and a 7-hour bus trip. And we're going to go teach about God and serve and hand out beds to orphans and immunosuppressed kids and give them a little bit of, support for their needs, and we are extremely excited about it. So, that's a real thing.
That's amazing because, my wife did some work similar in South Africa 10 years ago and ended up teaching kids English and such. So, those type of trips are definitely life-changing. Now, on the lighter side of things, Lefty Strat 5 on Twitter wants to know, do you ever sleep?
I do now. The first year of the twins, I did not. But they are sleeping now. Finally, after a year, we finally got them to sleep through the night. Although that does mean that Doug is a lot of times sleeping on their floor because they love him. They are daddy's girls, and especially Lennon, our youngest one, she needs someone close to her. So she'll wake up several times throughout the night, and we've actually gone to a weighted sleep sack that she sleeps with. Just to give her a little bit of a feel, almost like a hand is on her. But she reaches through the slats of her crib to reach out to see if Doug's there. So he spends a lot of nights on her floor.
Yeah, we just moved from crib we took the front off, so now it's the big girl bed, even though it's Ruby, our youngest, can get in and out. She's almost 3. So, my wife and I have actually been spending a lot of nights on floors recently. It's in the... Daddy, can you lay next to me? So I'm on the floor. Most of the time it's Abby, because once I go to sleep, I'm toast. Jersey Hokey 29 wants to know, when was the last time you hit a rise ball?
Oh, God. You know what? My one claim to fame was I got a sack bunt off of Jenny Finch because they came to Salem, and the Olympic team was touring and playing teams then, and she threw rise balls all the time. But that's my one claim to fame. I technically beat it out, but the umpire called me out. But after photo evidence, I was safe. So I do have that. But that probably was the last time. Tinch threw some ridiculous rise balls. So I didn't hit a lot live off of her in practice. So that was probably the last time.
Okay. Let's just. I'm going to dive into the softball discussion. I thought we were going to wrap up, but I covered a lot of softball. I was actually a professional softball announcer for whatever the women's professional league is now. Back then, it was Women's Pro Fast Pitch, and it was the Virginia Roadsters. I spent a very short time as their PA announcer when I was 17, so I know about softball. So, favorite who would be the one pitcher? You got the sack bunt / hit off Jenny Finch, but if there was one pitcher out there that you would want to line up against and drive one deep, who would that be against?
Oh gosh, you know what? Probably Monica Abbott, because we faced them twice in regionals at Tennessee, and we lost. So they had our number for a while, and She had such a unique style, how she would look down and not even, look at the batter as she started to pitch or the glove. And so she would probably be one for sure, to get back at Tennessee a little bit.
Well, being an Old Dominion alum, there's a lot of things in women's athletics we want to get back at Tennessee for, women's basketball being one of them.
Right, exactly.
I always thought Kat Osterman was one of the most imposing people, too. So,
yes. She was incredible. Yeah. Yep. She came up and told me afterwards that I was safe, so I really like her.
That's kind of a win. That's kind of, you'll take that one too. Like, yeah, guess what? Hey, guess what? I got one of those.
100%.
So.
I don't know if she would have told me that if she had been pitching, though.
So wrapping up, if people who have not discovered what the Schwab Mob basement battles and all these things are, I mean, how can they follow and keep up with the life of a coach's wife and everything that goes along with it on the social medias?
Well, I think I'm like Allyson Schwab on Twitter. It's not hard to find. And
of course, that's with a Y, by the way.
Instagram. Huh?
Allyson with a Y.
Yes, Allyson with a Y. My mom tried to make it difficult on me.
Oh, so you spell your kid's name Hendricks with an X.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I got back at him.
Yeah, sorry, Doug. Sorry about that. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw your wife under the bus there, or Jimi Hendrix, who was fantastic. So this has been a not so short episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. And I guess, Allyson, anything else you want to wrap up and throw at the wrestling community out there, whether it be the Panther Train, whether it be Iowa, or even the Hokie faithful, who they still actually they kind of like half root for Northern Iowa a little bit when they're not wrestling the Hokies because you were a Hokie.
Yep. No, I love my Hokie fans, and definitely will always have a place in my heart for, Blacksburg. So definitely that. No, just thankful for the community that we have in this sport. Thankful for everyone that has reached out to us. Whether it be, supporting Doug, the boys, or, lately the girls and our family. And we're just very grateful for all of that. Some of the best relationships that I have, friendships, are within the wrestling community. So I'm very grateful for this sport. Thank you for taking the time to interview. I laughed when you said me. I really thought you were trying to get in touch with Doug. So I was completely thrown off by it and very humbled by it. And just thank you guys.
I've interviewed Doug. I knew Doug at Tech. So, it's funny where the lives intersect. And now we're old and, I'm almost 40. I mean, is Doug 40 yet? I think he is, right?
Yeah, he is.
I think he's just a skosh older than I am. So you still got a little bit of time before that. So anyway, best of luck to you and the fam, and we'll see you down the line.
All right. Thank you so much.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Clothing. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. Hey, you know what? Did you like the show? You want to hit that subscribe button? MatTalkOnline.com/listen. Various different ways to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcatcher of choice. And if you're already subscribed, you already listened, and you love the show, and you want to support this show and this network, MatTalkOnline.com/join the team. Become a team member today.